Chapter 4198. Soon, the primordial divine spirit led them into the city. The huge city was very big, and there were many buildings inside. One could see that there were many people here, and it was a sea of people. Lu Ming and the rest flew across the sky in a flash. They did not alarm the people below. In the center of the city was a huge mountain that pierced the sky. It stood out like a crane and a flock of chickens. Some buildings could be seen on the peak of the mountain. Lu Ming and the others landed on a flat piece of land on the mountain peak. It was very quiet and there was no one here. This is my cultivation ground. From now on, all of you will stay here, surely. Wait a moment, bring them in. The primordial divine spirit ordered one of the muscular men. Yes, Lord incipient God. One of the muscular men bowed and accepted the order. They're here. At this moment, the primordial divine spirit looked at the void. Whoosh! The void split open and three figures appeared. One of them was God Lord Dream Void. However, she was in a sorry state and her aura was weak. Her clothes were stained with blood. Even with God Lord Dream Void's strength, she was in such a sorry state. One could imagine how intense the battle had been. Beside God Lord Dream Void was a middle-aged man and woman. His appearance looked very ordinary, but the aura on his body was incomparably terrifying. Although they did not deliberately release their auras, Lu Ming was still shocked. It was like an invincible existence was standing in the void. God Lords. These two were definitely God Lords. Lu Ming's heart thumped. He had a new understanding of the primordial divine lake's strength. So far, there were 3 God Lords. With such strength, even in the primitive universe, he would be ranked very high. Generally speaking, only the top 100 races of the primitive universe's 10,000 races list had God Lords. Moreover, the lower-ranked races usually only had one God Lord. Of course, there were exceptions. For example, some weaker races would occasionally have a God Lord, but such situations were rare. The primordial divine lake already had 3. The strength of the other 2 was unknown because he had not seen them fight. However, the one who brought Lu Ming and the others back was definitely terrifying. He had almost left a Lord of Heaven behind. God Lord Dream Void and the other 2 appeared on the mountain peak in a flash. Master, are you okay? Xiao Yu and the other 2 quickly went over and asked in concern. I'm fine. God Lord Dream Void smiled. She was relieved to see that the 3 of them were fine. God Lord Dream Void glanced at Lu Ming, but did not pay him much attention. She thought that Lu Ming was from the primordial divine lake. Dream Void, you really are the Lord's heart. There was a look of anticipation in the eyes of the primitive god, who had brought Lu Ming and the rest here. The other 2 divine lord experts did the same. Lu Ming was curious. What kind of legendary object was the Lord of God's heart that could make the Lord of Gods look forward to it? That's right, I've brought it out. God Lord Dream Void said. She then looked at the 3 of them. Autumn Moon nodded. With a wave of her hand, a metal box flew out. This metal box was covered in runes that sealed it. You guys step back. God Lord Dream Void said. She was talking to the 3 of them. She was talking to the 3 of them. Lu Ming, Autumn Moon, and the others all stepped back. The primordial divine spirit waved his hand, and a light screen appeared in front of Lu Ming and the others, protecting them. God Lord Dream Void began to break the seal on the metal box. Soon, the seal was broken and the metal box opened. Dong dong dong. As soon as the metal box was opened, Lu Ming heard a series of sounds that sounded like war drums. Every thud caused the void to tremble. Lu Ming felt that his heart was trembling as well, as if it was about to explode. At the same time, a tide-like aura rushed out of the metal box. It was incomparably terrifying. In the next instant, a dazzling blood-red light shot out of the metal box. The Divine Lords quickly took action and sealed the void, so that the blood-red light could not shine out. Otherwise, the entire city would be alarmed. Then, a ball of red light flew out of the metal box. A heart. Is that the main god's heart? Lu Ming opened his eyes wide. He realized that it was a heart that had flown out of the metal box. A heart the size of a human head was still beating, as if it was alive. One could see that there were dense runes covering the heart, which should be sealing the heart. However, even with the seal, there was still a terrifying and boundless aura emanating from it. Lu Ming felt his body tremble. He couldn't help but step back. His body felt like it was about to explode. Facing this heart was like facing an incomparably terrifying and tyrannical existence. Qiu Yu and the others weren't any better. They couldn't help but step back. Even the two strong men of the sixth great supreme god layer were the same. They were still under the protection of the original godly spirit's energy. Otherwise, they wouldn't have been able to resist it. What a terrifying qi. Why do I feel that this qi is even stronger than the Divine Lord's and the Lord of Heaven's qi? It's much stronger. A thought emerged in Lu Ming's mind. Then he was stunned by the thought. Could it be that this was a heart that was even stronger than the Divine Lord's? But didn't the original universe say that the Divine Lords were the strongest? Could there be someone stronger than the Divine Lords? The main god's heart? A main god? What is a main god? Is it a kind of original godly spirit? Various thoughts appeared in Lu Ming's mind. The qi emitted by the heart was very similar to the original godly spirit's qi. However, it was very ancient and terrifying. It's really the main god's heart. That's great. The original godly spirit was pleasantly surprised and excited. Not bad. With the main god's heart, the original godly lake can cultivate with it. Our strength will definitely increase and many experts will be born. The other Divine Lord middle-aged woman was also pleasantly surprised. Meng Su, we really have to thank you this time. After a while, the Divine Lords calmed down and one of them thanked God Meng Su solemnly. You're welcome. The main god's heart originally belonged to the original godly spirit. It was just sealed in the heavenly palace. Moreover, the heavenly palace has done a lot of evil. They're our common enemy. I brought it out to increase your strength. In the future, you'll have a better chance of dealing with the heavenly palace. God Meng Su said. No matter what, we still have to thank you. Meng Su, you're badly injured. You should hurry up and heal. The Divine Lord middle-aged woman said. God Meng Su nodded. Then he told the three Divine Lords to stay here for the time being. After that, the God Lords and God Lord Dream Void left the place. Only Lu Ming, Qiu Moon, and the two Divine Lords of the sixth great supreme god layer were left on the mountain peak. Chapter 4199. Everyone, come with us. We'll take you to where you'll be staying. A brawny man smiled. Thank you. Lu Ming smiled. The two brawny men led the way while Lu Ming and the others followed behind. Along the way, Lu Ming and the others asked about the primordial divine lake. The primordial divine lake is a huge world. Many primordial divine spirits were born in this world countless years ago. Therefore, the people in the primordial divine lake are either the descendants of the primordial divine spirits, or those who cultivate the primordial divine body. A brawny man explained. His name was Shirley. Why does this world look so similar to the primordial divine spirit world? Lu Ming's heart stirred. He was very curious. Can you see a lake over there? Shirley pointed to the west. Lu Ming and the group looked into the distance. They were on the top of the mountain, and their position was very high. After taking a closer look, they could indeed see that there seemed to be a lake in the west of the city. It was just that this lake was so huge that one couldn't see the end of it. It was like an ocean. It could be seen that the enormous city was built on the edge of a lake. That lake is the primordial divine lake. There's a city in each of the four directions of the primordial divine lake. We're in one of them. This mountain peak is the core of this city. Some of the most powerful divine masters live at the peak of this mountain. Therefore, ordinary people are unable to come up to this mountain peak. It is very quiet here, and no one will disturb you, Shirley explained. Lu Ming was even more shocked after hearing Shirley's explanation. If there were 4 such cities, then how many Divine Master Realm experts were there in those cities? According to Shirley's words, some of the most powerful Divine Masters, there must be many Divine Masters in the primordial Divine Lake. Then, Lu Ming sensed the environment carefully. The Divine Qi here was unimaginably rich. It was even richer than when the Dragon Clan's mother planet was revived. Moreover, the place was filled with an ancient aura. It was the aura of the primordial Divine Spirits. Those who cultivated divine power would definitely improve quickly if they cultivated here. For example, if his past self cultivated here, he would definitely be blessed by nature. Should I let my past self cultivate here? Lu Ming pondered. The 36 array discs in his hand could open a wormhole to the Dragon Clan's mother planet. Not only could it allow outsiders to enter the mother planet of the dragon race, it could also allow the mother planet of the dragon race to exit. After he opened the wormhole and connected the dragon race's mother planet to this place, he could let his past self come here. Let's wait. We're new here. Let's talk about it after we settle down. Lu Ming thought. Soon, they arrived in front of a courtyard. You can stay here for now. If there's anything, you can send us a message. This is my contact number. Shirley took out a voice transmission jade talisman and exchanged some contact information with Lu Ming and the others. The people of the primitive divine lake were enemies with the heavenly palace. Naturally, they would not use the dreamy heavenly jade. Lu Ming and the others stayed here for the night, while Shirley and the other two left. Dream Sky City, in a huge hall. Primordial divine lake, Dream Void. A cold voice came from the hall, full of anger. At the same time, it was accompanied by a terrifying aura, causing the people around the hall to tremble. Because this was the aura of the Lord of Heaven. A Lord of Heaven was furious. And that traitor heavenly soldier, have you found out? What's his background? In the hall, a Lord of Heaven said coldly. Yes, that heavenly soldier is called Mu Yun. He's a very powerful sky pride. Even Yi Yu was defeated by him. Someone below answered. To be able to defeat Yi Yu, that's rare. But no matter how strong he is, it's useless if he can't be used by me. Where did he come from? A Lord of Heaven asked. From the Fengdu sword sect of the Iron Sea Star Region Group. Someone below answered. Iron Sea Star Region Group? Fengdu sword sect? Pass down my order. From today onwards, Fengdu sword sect will cease to exist. A Lord of Heaven gave the order. Yes. Someone immediately accepted the order. A cold light flashed in his eyes. If there was no need to exist, then it would naturally be destroyed. Lord of Heaven, I've also found out that Mu Yun seems to be very close to a sky pride of the World Turtle Clan and the Elf Princess. How should we deal with him? Someone else asked. Very close? What do you mean? A Lord of Heaven frowned and asked. It's because they were very close to each other when they were participating in the Heavenly Soldier assessment, and often acted together. In addition, that Mu Yun seems to be the fiancé of the elf princess Ling Yue. Someone answered. He the elf clan. A Lord of Heaven sneered, his eyes cold. It's not the right time to touch the elf clan, or the World Turtle Clan. Send someone to monitor them first. If there's any movement, report it immediately. A Lord of Heaven said. Yes. Someone accepted the order. Everyone, Lord of Heaven, how should we deal with that Mu Yun? Someone else asked. He entered the heavenly palace, became a heavenly soldier, and put on the heavenly soldier armor. Where else can he escape to? Immediately call a divine master over and activate the restrictive power of the heavenly soldier armor to kill Mu Yun. A Lord of Heaven ordered. Yes, Lord of Heaven. Someone accepted the order and left. Not long after, a white-haired old man entered the hall. This was a divine master. The divine masters of the heavenly palace were responsible for refining all kinds of divine armors, battle suits, and inscribing all kinds of formation and restrictive power. They were also able to activate the restrictive power inside the armor. Everyone, Lord of Heaven, the traitor who betrayed the heavenly palace must die. This subordinate will activate the restrictive power and kill that traitor. The white-haired divine master bowed and immediately began to make his move. As he performed a series of hand seals, strange runes began to appear in his hands and swirl around like little snakes, as if they had come to life. He was activating the restrictive power inside the heavenly soldier armor. However, after a while, the white-haired divine master's face became more and more solemn and ugly. After a while, his expression was no longer ugly. Instead, it was gloomy. In the hall, the gazes of the Lord of Heaven also darkened. After a while, the white-haired divine master stopped and let out a long breath. His eyes were filled with uncertainty. What's going on? A Lord of Heaven asked. It's useless. The restrictive power has lost its effect. I can't sense it at all. The white-haired divine master said. Get to the point. One of the heaven monarchs frowned and said coldly. In other words, the restrictive power in Mu Yun's body has been refined and destroyed. The white-haired divine master said with a grave expression. What? How is that possible? A few exclamations sounded. In the hall, a total of 5 Lord of Heaven stood up together, and a terrifying aura emanated from their bodies. Many people below didn't even dare to breathe loudly. They were under great pressure. Chapter 4200. The faces of the 5 heavenly lords were dark and gloomy. Isn't the prohibition power in the heavenly soldier armor indestructible? One of the Lord of Heaven asked coldly. The white-haired priest broke out in a cold sweat under the pressure of the 5 Lord of Heaven. That's right. The power of the seals in the celestial battle armor can be distributed to every cell. Even a divine lord would find it difficult to destroy them. There's only one way to destroy the power of the seals on the celestial battle armor. The white-haired priest paused, his eyes filled with shock. A forbidden body. One of the Lord of Heaven said coldly, his eyes filled with murderous intent. The other 4 Lord of Heaven did the same, their eyes filled with murderous intent. They knew that only a priest from the heavenly palace could destroy the prohibition power in the heavenly soldier armor. Otherwise, there was only one other possibility. A forbidden body. They knew about the forbidden body and the mysteries of the forbidden power. The forbidden power could be distributed to every cell, so it was not difficult to destroy the prohibition power in the heavenly soldier armor. I didn't expect Mu Yin to have a forbidden body. No wonder he's so strong and can defeat you. Another Lord of Heaven said coldly. There's Lu Ming in the Dragon Clan's mother planet, and there's Mu Yin outside. 2 forbidden bodies. Another Lord of Heaven said with a gloomy face. 2 people with the forbidden physique had appeared in the same era. This was not a good sign. The forbidden body was a great enemy of the heavenly palace, and they had to be taken down. We can't let go of the forbidden body. We have to take it down. Moreover, the Lord God's heart is at the primordial divine lake, which will increase their strength. We can't let them. Primordial divine lake. How dare you? Don't think we don't know where you are. It seems like the heavenly palace hasn't made a move for many years, and these people are getting bolder. Spread the news and gather a portion of the divine masters. We can't let this matter rest. The Lord of Heaven spoke with icy murderous intents. Lu Ming was completely unaware that the fact that he possessed a taboo physique had been exposed. After resting for a day, he had recovered to his peak condition. This primitive divine lake world is very similar to the primitive divine spirit world. The people here are either the descendants of the primitive divine spirit, or those who cultivate the primitive divine body. This is interesting. Why don't we go and take a look? The more Lu Ming thought about it, the more curious he became. Immediately, he pulled Autumn Moon and Autumn Moon's 2 senior sisters down the mountain, intending to walk around and broaden his horizons. Autumn Moon and Lu Ming had not seen each other for many years. Naturally, he did not have any objections. As for the 2 senior sisters from Autumn Moon, they were very curious about this place and naturally agreed. The 4 of them walked down the mountain. Not long after, they arrived at the foot of the mountain. Then they flew into the distance. In front of them, they could see many tall buildings and a large crowd. Boom! Suddenly, Lu Ming and the rest discovered that there was a violent roar in the sky in front of them. Streaks of terrifying force swept in all directions. In the sky, 2 huge figures appeared and were fighting fiercely. The 2 figures were extremely huge. They were more than 10 million feet tall. The 2 huge figures were fighting fiercely in the sky. Are they primitive divine spirits? One of Autumn Moon's senior sisters exclaimed. No, their auras aren't rich and pure enough. They aren't real primitive divine spirits. They should be the descendants of the primitive divine spirits, Lu Ming explained. His past self cultivated the universe myriad Tao technique. He cultivated various divine powers and primitive divine power. He even cultivated the primitive divine blood. Hence, he knew the primitive divine spirits very well. The 2 people fighting before him were not pure primitive divine spirits. They should be the descendants of the primitive divine spirits or experts who cultivated the primitive divine body. These 2 beings were very powerful. They had definitely reached the high level of the divine emperor. However, there was no killing intent between them. They were probably just sparring. Sure enough, the two sides fought for a while, but there was no clear victor. Then they turned into two burly men, laughed, and flew to a place and disappeared. The other people around them were also not surprised by this. What a strange place, Autumn Moon mumbled. It is indeed strange. Let's go and take a look. Lu Ming and the others sped up. However, they were stopped when they approached a bustling area. 5 young men stood in front of Lu Ming and the rest. The 5 young men looked to be in their 20s. They scanned Lu Ming and the others. When their eyes fell on Autumn Moon and the others, they were stunned. Who are you? I haven't seen you before. A young man with red hair was the first to speak. We just came to the primitive divine lake not long ago. My master is a friend of the primitive divine lake. One of Autumn Moon's senior sisters replied. Oh, so you are outsiders. You just came to the primitive divine lake. The 5 young men looked at each other and smiled. Ladies, you have just arrived at the primordial divine emperor. I believe you are not familiar with the environment here. Why don't you let us bring you around for a tour? The young man with red hair said with a smile. His eyes kept wandering between Autumn Moon and Autumn Moon's senior sisters. Qiu Yu and Qiu Yu's 2 senior sisters were undoubtedly rare women in the world. They were peerlessly beautiful and peerlessly beautiful. This was especially true for Qiu Yu. She had a unique temperament that could involuntarily attract the attention of others. Lu Ming frowned. He knew what these young men were up to. How could he let them have designs on Autumn Moon? No need. We can walk around on our own. Lu Ming said and refused. The 5 young men's faces darkened immediately. They looked at Lu Ming coldly. Did I talk to you? I'm talking to the 3 ladies. What does it have to do with you? The red-haired young man said coldly. What he says is what I say. Autumn Moon grabbed Lu Ming's hand and said. Autumn Moon's words and Autumn Moon's actions were a slap in the face. The young men's faces darkened. Kid, why don't you look at yourself in the mirror? Who do you think you are to walk with the 3 ladies? That's right. Besides, you're too greedy. You'd better give up a few of them if you want to eat all 3 of them. That's right. If you know what's good for you, you'd better get out of here. Otherwise, I don't know what will happen to you. The young men said one after another. Their threats were self-evident. However, did Lu Ming grow up in fear? Obviously not. What if I don't leave? Lu Ming said calmly. Brat, don't be too thick-skinned. I'll tell you bluntly, the 3 ladies are all peerless beauties. How can you be worthy of them? If you walk together with them, you'll be sullying them. Do you understand? The red-haired young man shouted. If I'm not worthy, do you think you're worthy? Lu Ming sneered. Chapter 4201. Of course we're good enough for her, shouted the red-haired young man. You? Hee, forgive me for being blunt, but you're too weak. You can't even compare to my finger, said Lu Ming, shaking his head disdainfully. You. The 5 young men's faces turned red, and they glared at Lu Ming furiously. Boom. One of the young men exuded a powerful aura, forming a powerful pressure that pressed down on Lu Ming. 8th Godly Emperor Layer. The young man had the cultivation of the 8th Divine Emperor realm. He took a step forward and the air shook. Then he threw a punch at Lu Ming. I'll show you who's good enough for her and who's not. His voice and his fist arrived in front of Lu Ming at the same time, aiming at Lu Ming's face. Being able to break through to the 8th Godly Emperor layer wasn't bad at all, so he was very arrogant. However, in front of Lu Ming, such a cultivation level was really not enough. Lu Ming waved his hand and slapped him as if he was swatting a fly. Instantly, there was a strong gust of wind, and a terrifying force swept out. With a cracking sound, the other party's fist bones shattered. He screamed and his body flew backward, crashing onto the ground below and vomiting a mouthful of blood. You're so weak and you want to talk about being good enough for me? Said Lu Ming indifferently. He didn't try to hide his mockery. Normally, Lu Ming wouldn't make fun of other people, but when it came to his women, it was a different matter. He and Qiu Moon had been separated for so many years, they had just met again. And that young man was trying to steal her away. How could he be happy? The other 4 young men's expressions changed drastically. They hadn't thought that Lu Ming would be so strong. That young man couldn't withstand a single attack from Lu Ming. They knew very well that although the young man was only at the 8th Divine Emperor realm, he could fight someone who was 3 levels higher than him. He was considered a top genius. Not many people in the Divine Emperor realm could be his match. However, he had been sent flying by Lu Ming's slap. Lu Ming's battle prowess was somewhat unexpected. So you've already broken through to the 9th Godly Emperor layer. No wonder you're so arrogant. But let me tell you, even if you're at the same cultivation level, there's a huge difference in fighting abilities. Let me show you what real fighting abilities are. The red-haired young man's eyes were filled with a cold light. He stepped out, and his powerful aura exploded. 9th Godly Emperor layer. The red-haired young man had the strength of the 9th Godly Emperor layer. A layer of red heat spread out from his body. It was extremely hot, and it burned the void within a radius of dozens of meters into pitch black. That was because the space had been burned. It was pitch black, and there was nothing there. Kill! The red-haired youth shouted as he punched out at Lu Ming. The instant he punched out, his fist rapidly grew in size. A layer of fiery red hair appeared on his fist, and there were also fiery red flames burning on the hair. A fist the size of a small mountain pressed down. Before it even arrived, the scorching flames seemed like they were going to burn Lu Ming. However, Lu Ming's expression didn't change at all. He was calm and indifferent. Lu Ming didn't fear anyone at the same cultivation level as him. He had already reached the limit of the Godly Emperor layer. 9 layers was the limit, and it was difficult to surpass it. Unless someone could surpass 10 layers, but according to Guemo, that was impossible. Boom. Lu Ming casually slapped the fiery red fist. There was a loud bang and the flames were extinguished. The red-haired young man retreated a few thousand meters before he could stabilize himself. He seemed to be in a sorry state. "That's all you've got," said Lu Ming indifferently. "You want to die?" shouted the red-haired young man furiously. He had wanted to show off in front of the beautiful women of the Autumn Moon Festival, but in the end, he had been humiliated. Roar. He let out a roar, and then his body expanded rapidly, becoming 1,000,000 meters tall. He stood tall, and his head reached into the sky. He was a giant ape. The red-haired young man turned into a 1,000,000 tall giant ape. His body was covered in red flames, and his aura was wild. Primitive divine body, no, it's primitive divine blood. Lu Ming's heart stirred. He could tell that the red-haired young man had refined more than 1 drop of primitive divine blood. And there's a big battle over there. It seems to be Yuan Jin. It's him. I heard that he has refined 88 drops of primitive divine blood. Let's go and take a look. Let's go. The red-haired young man became 1,000,000 zhang tall, and the surrounding area was alarmed. Many people flew over. Boom. A long red rod appeared in the red-haired young man's hand, and he smashed it at Lu Ming. The fiery red staff was as huge as a mountain. He can fight someone who is 4 levels above him. Lu Ming saw the red-haired young man's attack, and he had a rough idea of his combat strength. He was calculating how much strength he should use. Then Lu Ming threw out a punch. Lu Ming used the great fragmentation skill in this punch. Lu Ming's tiny fist and the red long rod that was as big as a mountain swelled together. Crack. There was no loud explosion. When the 2 attacks collided, the red rod was covered with cracks, and then it exploded with a bang. Then, the fist force continued to hit the red-haired young man's body. The red-haired young man screamed. His chest was penetrated by the fist force, and there was a hole in his chest. The red-haired young man's body was like a deflated balloon, and he quickly shrank back to his original size. He was pushed back dozens of miles, and he spat out blood. What? Yuan Jin was defeated in 1 move. The surrounding people could not help but widen their eyes, their faces filled with disbelief. Yuan Jin was considered a rather famous genius at the primordial divine lake. Many people knew him, and they even knew of his combat strength. Among the divine emperors, only a few people could suppress Yuan Jin. No one dared to say that they could defeat him. However, Yuan Jin was defeated in 1 move. And it was a stranger. Who is he? Is he a new genius at the primitive sacred lake? But why don't I feel the aura of a primitive divine spirit from him? He is really strong. He can defeat Yuan Jin in 1 move. Is he able to fight someone who is 4.5 levels above him, or even 5 levels above him? The people around started to talk about it. Now who is qualified? Lu Ming looked at Yuan Jin indifferently. Puff. Yuan Jin was so angry that he spat out another mouthful of blood. The other 3 young men were pale, and they did not dare to say a word. They were not as strong as Yuan Jin, and they would be defeated if they went up. Wait and see. Someone will take care of you. The red-haired young man pointed at Lu Ming and shouted. Oh, you want to call for help? Well, I will wait here. Call for help. As long as it is a fight between people of the same level, I will accept it. Lu Ming said, and his voice spread in all directions. Chapter 4202. Yuan Jin wanted to call for help, so Lu Ming accepted his challenge. Of course, he had another condition. They had to fight against cultivators of the same level. Lu Ming knew that the gap between godly emperors and great supreme gods was huge. Even though he was strong, he wasn't invincible. If his opponents had some great supreme gods, he wouldn't be able to defeat them. If they were godly emperors, he would be invincible. However, Lu Ming's words still sounded very arrogant in the ears of others. How arrogant! He's going to fight against godly emperors. Does he really think he's invincible? Primitive Divine Lake has many monstrous geniuses. Yuan Jin's cousin Yuan Zhan is even more terrifying. He can fight against cultivators who are 5 cultivation levels higher than him. Just watch, he'll be here soon. The surrounding people of the primeval Divine Lake were discussing animatedly, and the news kept spreading, attracting even more people to watch. All right, wait for me, shouted Yuan Jin. Then he took out a talisman and started communicating telepathically. Lu Ming watched calmly. The reason why he had directly accepted the other party's challenge and waited here was because he was a little curious. He was curious about the strength of primitive Divine Lake. Since the primordial Divine Lake dared to challenge the Heavenly Palace, it was not enough to have only high-end combat power. Lu Ming wanted to see how strong primitive Divine Lake's geniuses were. Besides, almost all the people of primitive Divine Lake practiced the primitive godly body. Lu Ming's past self practiced the primitive godly body. Lu Ming also wanted to see how strong he was. Another important reason was that Lu Ming's cultivation level had reached a bottleneck. He was stuck at the top of the 9th godly emperor layer. He couldn't break through for the time being. It would be difficult to break through if he just meditated in seclusion. It was better to fight against people of all kinds. Maybe he could find an opportunity to break through. That was hard to say. Therefore, if Yuan Jin wanted to fight, he wasn't afraid. Everybody waited calmly. They didn't have to wait for too long. In the distance, a few silhouettes appeared. One of them had red hair. His chi was similar to Yuan Jin's, but his chi was even more aggressive. Yuan Zhan really came. There's going to be a good show. Someone cried out in alarm, looking at the red-haired youth. Cousin, you've come. When Yuan Jin saw Yuan Zhan, he hurriedly went over to greet him with a smile. Where is the person you're talking about? Yuan Zhan was very direct, and went straight to the point. That's the one. He's extremely arrogant. He said that he doesn't fear anyone from our primordial Divine Lake when fighting at the same level. Yuan Jin pointed at Lu Ming. Hee, what big words. I want to see how strong he is. Yuan Zhan looked at Lu Ming, a sharp light flashing in his eyes. A powerful burning aura pressed down on Lu Ming. Bang. Following that, he took a step forward, causing the void to tremble violently. An even more berserk aura burst forth. At the same time, his body rapidly grew in size until he was 1,000,000 zhang tall. He was also a giant ape covered in fiery red fur. The only difference was that he was not holding a staff. Instead, he was holding a saber. His aura was much stronger than Yuan Jin's. Take this. Divine Ape Slash. Yuan Zhan roared. He held the saber with both hands and slashed with all his might. The giant flaming saber slashed violently at Lu Ming. The flaming saber split the sky in half and slashed down at Lu Ming's head. The power was so strong that it was horrifying. Even an ordinary emperor god expert would be shocked, and would want to avoid it. It's indeed powerful. This person probably has a lot of primordial divine blood. His battle strength is equivalent to fighting someone 5 levels higher. Such a genius is comparable to the battle god Yuan One. A thought flashed through Lu Ming's mind. It seemed that the primordial divine lake was not weak. On second thought, it was normal. After all, they were an existence that dared to go against the heavenly palace. In addition, many people in the primordial divine lake were the descendants of the primordial divine spirit. Although their talents were not as strong as the pure primordial divine spirit, they were still terrifying. They were much stronger than ordinary races. Moreover, with the guidance of the real primordial divine spirit, it was normal for some monstrous geniuses to be born. Lu Ming believed that there must be more geniuses in the primordial divine lake who were more talented than Yuan Zhan. Lu Ming was getting more and more interested. However, Yuan Zhan was not a threat to Lu Ming. Lu Ming grabbed the air with his palm, and a saber condensed in his hand as well. It was the Great God Saber technique, one of the 3,000 ancient secret skills. Whoosh! Lu Ming slashed with his saber. The two sabers met in the air and collided. With a clang, sparks flew and the two sabers vibrated violently. However, it was clear that Yuan Zhan's battle saber was vibrating even more violently. Then his battle saber flew out of his hand and stabbed into a mountain in the distance, splitting the mountain in half. Everything in the surroundings was burned to ashes by the flames on the battle saber, including the rocks. At the same time, Yuan Zhan's body retreated rapidly. Every step he took caused a huge explosion in the void. The people behind him quickly retreated to avoid Yuan Zhan. Yuan Zhan widened his eyes and stared at Lu Ming in horror. He couldn't believe that his weapon was knocked away by Lu Ming in one move. "That's all you got," Lu Ming said indifferently. He swung his saber again, and a saber radiance flew towards Yuan Zhan. Yuan Zhan roared and tried to block with his fist. However, it was useless. A huge scar appeared on Yuan Zhan's body as the saber radiance slashed past. He let out a scream and his huge body shrunk rapidly to the size of an ordinary person. There was still a saber wound on his chest and blood kept flowing out. Yuan Zhan's face was covered in cold sweat. He felt that Lu Ming had the ability to kill him, but he had shown mercy. He felt that he had just taken a trip to the gates of hell. How can he be so powerful? Yuan Zhan's heart was in turmoil. At the side, Yuan Jin was also dumbstruck, and his face turned pale. Even Yuan Zhan was no match for Lu Ming. Lu Ming's combat strength was far beyond his expectations. What kind of monster did he offend? The surrounding people were also dumbfounded and abnormally shocked. Even Yuan Zhan was no match for Lu Ming, who in the Divine Emperor realm could defeat him. In the primitive godly lake, there were a few cultivators of the 9th godly emperor layer who were stronger than Yuan Zhan, but they were all in the primitive godly lake, looking for opportunities to break through to the great supreme god layer. Anyone else? Lu Ming asked again. He glanced at Yuan Jin, Yuan Zhan and the others. Yuan Zhan and the others pulled a long face. Lu Ming's meaning was obvious. Was there anyone else who wanted to continue attacking? He was waiting. In other words, Yuan Zhan and the others weren't strong enough. Chapter 4203. After being questioned by Lu Ming, Yuan Zhan, Yuan Jin and the rest had ugly expressions. They gritted their teeth and remained silent, unable to say a word. Now, where were they going to find a stronger genius to deal with Lu Ming? Therefore, they could only remain silent. Interesting. I didn't expect such a powerful genius to appear after a period of seclusion. At that moment, a cold voice broke the silence. A figure walked over from the southwest. With every step he took, a flower petal would appear under his feet. It was a young man in white. He was very handsome and elegant. His temperament was poles apart from the others. The people of the primitive divine lake, regardless of gender, were more boorish and bold. Their aura was also more ancient and violent. This was related to the primitive divine body they cultivated, and the descendants of the primitive divine spirit. However, this young man's temperament was completely different from the others of the primitive divine lake. It's Fei Yi. Fei Yi is here too. Is he going to fight? But hasn't he reached the God Emperor realm a long time ago? The arrival of the young man in white caused a lot of discussion. Lu Ming also looked at the young man in white with a serious expression. This young man gave him a lot of pressure. Lu Ming was naturally not afraid of anyone of the same level, However, his opponent was a god emperor. His cultivation level was much higher, and he was also a monstrous genius. Lu Ming felt a lot of pressure. Interesting. Fei Yi, are you going to fight? Another voice was heard. Another figure was coming from the northeast. It was also a young man. This young man had the typical temperament of the primitive divine lake world. He had a boorish figure and a wild temperament. He had a domineering aura. He carried a battle axe in his hand like a door plank. With every step he took, the void would shake. It was as though he was carrying a huge mountain on his back. It's Zhongzhan. He's here too. This person is as famous as Fei Yi. It's not just him. Look in the other directions. A few more exclamations were heard. At that moment, a few young men appeared in the other directions. These young men all had unparalleled temperaments. They were not to be underestimated. Lu Ming's eyes narrowed. This was because these few young men gave him a lot of pressure. God Emperor. Without a doubt, they were all God Emperors. At his current level of cultivation, the only ones who could pressure him were the God Emperors. As a matter of fact, these young men were the strongest geniuses of the primordial godly lake world. They were usually in seclusion, but they had all shown up at the same time. Could it be that Flying Leaf, Zhongzhan, and the others are going to make a move? They are celestial emperors. It's beneath their dignity to fight against celestial emperors with celestial emperors. That's true, but looking at their state, they seem to be very interested. It's possible that no one will make a move. Just watch. Many people were talking about it. Even many of the older generation people were looking forward to it. The clash between the geniuses of the younger generation had always attracted a lot of attention because it represented the future, represented hope. Yuan Zhan and Yuan Jin also revealed looks of anticipation. They were looking forward to someone taking action to suppress Lu Ming. What? You want to fight? Fei Yi glanced at the other young men. Of course I want to. However, to deal with him with the cultivation of a celestial emperor, I'm afraid others will laugh at me. Zhongzhan shook his head. That's easy. Just suppress your cultivation. I'll go and test him, said Fei Yi. Then he looked at Lu Ming. His figure flickered and he appeared in front of Lu Ming. Don't worry. I won't use my cultivation to suppress you. I'll suppress my cultivation to the 9th godly emperor layer and fight with you. It's fair, Fei Yi said. His eyes were filled with confidence. Lu Ming smiled indifferently. He didn't think too much about it. Actually, even if a celestial emperor suppressed his cultivation to the same level as him, it wasn't fair. Because the higher one's cultivation was, the more beneficial it would be to awaken one's original divine strength. It would also be easier for one to comprehend original secret techniques. If Fei Yi had broken through to the celestial emperor layer for a period of time, his original divine strength and original secret techniques would definitely advance by leaps and bounds. It would be incomparable to a celestial emperor layer cultivator. Therefore, even if he suppressed his cultivation to the celestial emperor layer, the quality of his original divine strength and original secret techniques were all from the celestial emperor layer. It wasn't fair. For example, if he was a genius of the 4th cultivation level, he could fight against cultivators who were 4 cultivation levels higher than him. When he broke through to the celestial emperor layer and cultivated for a period of time, his original divine strength and original secret techniques would advance by leaps and bounds. Then, if he suppressed his cultivation level back to the celestial emperor layer, he would be as strong as a genius who could fight against cultivators who were 5 cultivation levels higher than him. Therefore, Fei Yi said that he would suppress his cultivation level and fight against Lu Ming to be fair. That was a bit shameless. However, Lu Ming didn't feel like pointing it out. If you want to fight, let's fight. That was Lu Ming's reply. It was simple and he was confident. You're very confident. I hope you have the ability to be confident. Be careful, Fei Yi said. As soon as his voice fell, a powerful aura spread out from his body. His body was shrouded by a layer of green divine light. Then, dense leaves appeared around him. These leaves were of different shapes. Some were sword-shaped, some were saber-shaped, some were pagoda-shaped, and some were human-shaped. Kill! Fei Yi shouted coldly. With a wave of his hand, Countless leaves flew towards Lu Ming. Asterisk clang. Asterisk the sword-shaped leaves made a sword cry and slashed towards Lu Ming like a divine sword. The saber-shaped leaves were like divine sabers. They burst out dazzling saber radiance and slashed towards Lu Ming's vital points. The pagoda-shaped leaves turned into a divine pagoda and pressed down on Lu Ming. The most peculiar thing was that the human-shaped leaves were actually using secret techniques to attack Lu Ming. In an instant, at least a few hundred attacks were launched towards Lu Ming. This is secret technique of origin? What a strange secret technique of origin. Lu Ming's eyes flashed. It was the first time he had seen this type of secret technique of origin. He had to admit that it was very mysterious and powerful. However, to compete with Lu Ming in terms of tricks? Then he had found the wrong person. Go. Lu Ming waved his hands. However, hundreds of secret techniques appeared between heaven and earth. Great Divine Wind Technique, Great Devil Sword Technique, Great Divine Pagoda Technique, Great Divine Saber Technique. So many secret techniques rushed towards the other party. This was not the Heavenly Palace. Lu Ming could control the secrets of many ancient secret techniques. He did not need to hide them and directly use them. Their attacks collided, causing a series of explosions to erupt. However, the duration of the explosion was very short. After a breath's time, the explosion stopped and the secret skill that Lu Ming had cast disappeared. The air was filled with leaves. However, these leaves were all split into 2 or 3 pieces. Obviously, the other party's attack was broken by Lu Ming. Chapter 4204. Seeing that his secret skill was easily broken by Lu Ming, Fei Ye's face darkened. Let's see how many moves you can take. A cold voice came out of Fei Ye's mouth. Then his body rapidly swelled up. Then, a giant tree appeared between heaven and earth. Fei Ye turned into a giant tree. It was extremely huge, more than 1,000,000 feet tall. The tree crown opened up and covered the sky. It was like the legendary world divine tree. This is the primordial divine body. Lu Ming was slightly stunned. It was Lu Ming's first time seeing a plant-type primordial divine body. However, it wasn't strange. Not all primordial divine spirits were flesh and blood. There were also plant-type primordial divine spirits, but they were very rare. Obviously, Fei Ye was either the descendant of a plant-type primordial divine spirit, or the primordial divine body that he cultivated was a plant-type primordial divine spirit. The giant tree that Fei Ye turned into was filled with leaves. These leaves were also of various colors and shapes. Then the giant tree shook. Countless leaves on the crown flew up and turned into various attacks, attacking Lu Ming. There were at least tens of thousands of densely packed attacks, covering a large area of the void. The power of these attacks was extremely terrifying. This move is interesting. Lu Ming revealed a faint smile. Then, a ray of light emerged from his body and shrouded him. It was one of the 3,000 ancient secret skills, the Great Defense Skill. After Lu Ming used the Great Defense Skill, the attacks formed by the leaves had already landed on Lu Ming. Clang, clang, clang. These attacks landed on the Great Defense Skill and made the sound of metal clashing. Sparks flew and violent explosions were heard. However, none of the attacks could break through the Great Defense Skill's defense. They could only make the Great Defense Skill vibrate slightly. In the blink of an eye, at least tens of thousands of attacks landed on Lu Ming's body. However, it was useless. There was no effect at all. They couldn't break through the defense at all. Fei Ye's face was extremely ugly. How is this possible? How is this possible? Fei Ye roared in his heart. His face was red. He couldn't wait to unleash his God Emperor Realm cultivation and attack. However, there were so many people watching. If he were to use his God Emperor Realm cultivation base now, he would lose all his face. He wouldn't be able to survive in the primordial divine lake anymore. Therefore, he could only push his strength to the limit of the deity Emperor Realm, infinitely close to the God Emperor Realm. However, as long as they were in the Divine Emperor Realm, even if they were infinitely close to the Great God Emperor Realm, they were still Divine Emperors. The difference between them and the Great God Emperor Realm was too great to affect Lu Ming. Around them, the spectators also widened their eyes and stared fixedly. What a terrifying defense. Looks like the flying leaf can't break his defense at all. His strength is unfathomable. I wonder how strong he is. Indeed, the surrounding people discussed animatedly. They were once again shocked by Lu Ming's strength. Based on the strength of the Divine Emperor layer, this man can fight someone who is 6.5 levels higher than him. Lu Ming speculated in his heart. In the Divine Emperor realm, being able to fight someone who is 6.5 levels higher than him was already very terrifying. Among all the geniuses that Lu Ming had met, only Yi Yu from the heavenly human tribe was able to do so. However, Lu Ming speculated that if Fei Yi was in the Divine Emperor realm, he wouldn't have been able to fight someone who was 6.5 levels higher than him. After he had broken through to the God Emperor realm, he had used the God Emperor realm as his foundation to cultivate for a period of time. Whether it was the primitive divine body, origin secret skills, or divine power, he had made great progress. Then he suppressed his strength to the Divine Emperor realm to be able to fight someone who was 6.5 levels higher than him. Otherwise, Lu Ming speculated that the other party would be able to fight someone who was 5.5 levels higher than him in the Divine Emperor realm. For example, if a Divine Master Realm cultivator had reached an astonishing level in all aspects, such as origin secret skills, divine power, etc. If a Divine Master Realm cultivator suppressed his cultivation to the Divine Emperor realm, it wouldn't be difficult for him to fight someone who was 9 levels higher than him. That was why Fei Yi was astonished. He couldn't believe it. Although he was an Emperor God and had suppressed his cultivation to the 9th level of the Divine Emperor realm, he could fight someone who was 6.5 levels higher than him. However, he could not break through Lu Ming's defense. One could imagine how powerful Lu Ming was. He could fight someone who was 7 levels higher than him. Had such a monster appeared in the primordial divine lake? It seems like that's all you've got. Let's end this battle then. At this moment, Lu Ming spoke in a faint voice. Then Lu Ming took a step forward and his body shot out like an arrow, piercing through the flying leaf. The moment he dashed out, Lu Ming threw a punch. This punch contained the great art of destruction, the great art of shattering, and a series of extremely destructive ancient secret skills. Wherever Lu Ming passed by, all the attacks of the flying leaves were defeated, and all the leaves exploded. In the blink of an eye, Lu Ming appeared under Fei Ye's gigantic tree. His fist accurately hit the trunk of the tree. A terrifying fist energy moved towards the trunk of the tree. Oh no! Fei Ye's heart pounded violently. He could sense how terrifying Lu Ming's punch was. If he continued suppressing his strength, he would definitely be severely injured. At the critical moment, he could not be bothered to continue suppressing his cultivation level. Instead, he unleashed a powerful aura. The power of the God Thearch realm gushed out wildly, wanting to block Lu Ming's punch. Boom! There was an earth-shattering roar and Lu Ming's figure retreated rapidly. He was pushed back tens of thousands of meters before he stopped. However, Fei Ye's gigantic tree was also shaking violently. The gigantic trunk was also pushed back. A gigantic hole appeared in the middle of the trunk. The gigantic tree quickly shrank and turned back into Fei Yi. At that moment, Fei Ye's face was pale. There was blood on the corner of his mouth. Even though he had released the strength of a great god, he was still injured. Firstly, the strength of Lu Ming's punch was indeed shockingly powerful. Secondly, Fei Yi had released the strength of a great god on the spur of the moment. At that moment, he couldn't fully release his strength. Therefore, even though he managed to block Lu Ming's attack, he still suffered some injuries. You've lost. Lu Ming stood in the void and looked at Fei Yi indifferently. According to the agreement, Fei Yi had to suppress his cultivation to the Divine Emperor realm. Now that he had released the strength of a great god, it was equivalent to losing. Fei Yi's face was gloomy. Cold light flickered continuously as he stared at Lu Ming. He had indeed lost. He knew that he wasn't Lu Ming's opponent when they were at the same level. He couldn't wait to use his full strength to suppress Lu Ming. However, that would be even more embarrassing. Fei Yi snorted coldly. He walked to the side and stopped talking. Who else wants to come up and try? Lu Ming's gaze swept towards Song Zhan and the others. Song Zhan and the others looked gloomy. However, none of them came out to fight. They knew their own strength. After suppressing their cultivation to the Divine Emperor realm, they were at most on par with Fei Yi. They were definitely not Lu Ming's opponent. Chapter 4205. No one stepped forward to fight with Lu Ming. The surrounding spectators were also discussing animatedly. Is there no one in the primordial divine lake who can fight with him? It's difficult. There's almost no one who can surpass Fei Yi in a battle of the same level. This person's combat strength is really terrifying. Unless he's a pure primordial divine spirit. But how can there be a young primordial divine spirit in this era? Some people sighed. It was difficult to find someone who could match Lu Ming in a battle of the same level. No one else? Lu Ming whispered, a little disappointed. He originally wanted to look around to see if there were any opponents to fight with, but it seemed like he was going to be disappointed. Not necessarily. There's someone who can definitely defeat him. Have you forgotten about that monster? Suddenly, someone shouted. Everyone looked over and saw that it was Yuan Jin. At first, it was Yuan Jin who provoked Lu Ming, but now Lu Ming was in the limelight, slapping him in the face. This made him extremely unhappy, and he wanted someone to suppress Lu Ming. Hearing Yuan Jin's words, many people seemed to have thought of something, and their expressions changed. You mean that monster? Someone asked. That's right, that monster. Yuan Jin gritted his teeth and nodded. But that monster is extremely arrogant. He doesn't like ordinary people at all, and his temper is very strange. Who can invite him? That's right, and I heard that he travels in the primordial divine lake all year round. Even if you want to find him, you can't find him. Some people shook their heads. As far as I know, that monster hasn't been in the primordial divine lake during this period. He's in seclusion in his residence, Yuan Jin said. Even if he's in seclusion in his residence, who can invite him here? He doesn't give face to anyone except for the Divine Master Realm Masters. Someone said, I'll invite him. Yuan Jin gritted his teeth. In order to suppress Lu Ming, he was going to go all out. Kid, do you dare to wait here for a while? I'll find someone stronger to suppress you. Yuan Jin looked at Lu Ming and said, Someone stronger? Don't disappoint me again. Lu Ming said lightly. As soon as this was said, Fei Ye's expression turned even uglier. Lu Ming was implying that he had disappointed Lu Ming. Don't worry, that person's strength has exceeded your imagination, Yuan Jin said. Oh, in that case I'll wait here. After that, Lu Ming walked to Autumn Moon's side and started chatting and laughing with Autumn Moon. Brat, just you wait. Yuan Jin roared in his heart. He was extremely jealous. Then he turned around and left. Yuan Jin, I'll go with you, Yuan Zhan said and followed Yuan Xie. The huge city that Lu Ming and the others were in was to the east of the primordial divine lake. And the person Yuan Jin and the others wanted to invite was not in this city, but in the city north of the primordial divine lake. They flew quickly and soon arrived at the city in the north. Then they came to a small hill. On the small hill, there was a simple wooden house. It looked ordinary, but it was simple and elegant. As soon as they arrived, Yuan Jin and Yuan Zhan could not help but feel nervous. They looked at each other and saw the cold sweat on each other's face. It seemed that there was something in the wooden house that they were very afraid of. Yuan Jin, are you really going to alert that monster? In my opinion, let's just forget about it, Yuan Zhan said and was a little hesitant. Yuan Jin was also a little guilty. However, in order to suppress Lu Ming, he gritted his teeth and said, Invite him, we must invite him. That brat embarrassed me in public. I must teach him a lesson. Then have you thought of a reason to ask? Yuan Zhan asked. Don't worry, that monster is arrogant, but he's also extremely battle-hungry. He loves to fight with top monsters. When he knows that there's a particularly powerful monster, he'll definitely make a move, Yuan Jin said. As they spoke, the two of them were not far from the wooden house. You too, I'll give you 3 breaths time to get lost. Otherwise, don't blame me for being rude. At that moment, a cold voice came from the wooden house. Hearing this figure, Yuan Jin and Yuan Zhan's bodies suddenly trembled, as if they were startled. Yuan Jin swallowed his saliva and tried to steady himself. He said, There's a new peerless monster in the primordial godly lake. He's extremely strong. I want you to exchange pointers with him. I'm not interested. You can leave now. That voice rang out, directly refusing. Don't be in such a hurry to refuse. That person is really strong. He has the strength of the 9th godly emperor layer. But Fei Yi suppressed his cultivation to the 9th godly emperor layer, and he defeated him in one strike, said Yuan Jin hastily. Oh, this time, the voice in the wooden house let out a soft oh, as if it was more interested in the story. Fei Yi suppressed his cultivation to the 9th godly emperor layer, and he defeated him in one strike? Interesting. After that, the door of the wooden house opened, and a young man appeared in front of Yuan Jin and Yuan Zhan. This was a young man. He was tall and slender with firm muscles. He was wearing a simple gray robe. Just by standing there casually, he exuded a terrifying aura. It was as if a terrifying cultivator was hiding inside his body, and he could attack at any moment. Yuan Jin and Yuan Zhan didn't dare breathe too loudly when they saw that young man. They couldn't help but recall the scene of them being oppressed by that young man. If Lu Ming had been there, he would have been pleasantly surprised. Because Lu Ming knew that young man. He was Lu Ming's old friend, the Wan Shen. Indeed, that young man was the Wan Shen. Back then, Lu Ming and the Wan Shen had entered the primordial godly spirit world together. In the end, the Wan Shen had followed the strong cultivators of the primordial godly spirit world to another world. A world that was more suitable for the Wan Shen to practice cultivation. Lu Ming had left the primordial godly spirit world, and they had parted. I hope you're telling the truth. If I find out you're lying to me, you know the consequences. The Wan Shen glanced coldly at Yuan Jin and Yuan Zhan. After so many years, the Wan Shen's temperament had changed greatly. He had become much sharper and more domineering. Yuan Jin and Yuan Zhan both quivered with fear. When the Wan Shen had first arrived, they had used their cultivation to bully the Wan Shen. However, they hadn't expected that the Wan Shen would display such terrifying talent. His cultivation would increase rapidly, and so would his combat strength. Soon, his cultivation would catch up to theirs and he would oppress them several times. Moreover, the Wan Shen's talent was valued by all the strong cultivators of the primordial godly lake. In terms of background, they couldn't compare to the Wan Shen. From then on, the Wan Shen had left a shadow in their hearts. If they hadn't wanted to teach Lu Ming a lesson, they wouldn't have come to deal with the Wan Shen. It's true. It's definitely true. That guy is really powerful. I believe you won't be disappointed, Yuan Jin said hurriedly. Chapter 4206. Is that so? Interesting. Then let's go meet that fellow. The myriad god smiled as he stepped into the air. Yuan Jin and Yuan Zhan were pleasantly surprised as they hurriedly followed. On the other end, Lu Ming, Qiu Moon, and the others were quietly waiting. Qiu Moon was not worried about Lu Ming. After exchanging blows with the celestial soldiers and divine generals, she was well aware of Lu Ming's strength. As long as his opponent did not use cultivation to suppress Lu Ming, she did not believe that anyone could be stronger than Lu Ming in a battle of the same level. Her young master had never disappointed her. He's here. Suddenly, someone cried out in alarm and looked in a certain direction. Simultaneously, everyone's gaze turned in that direction. It's him. It's that monster. He's really here. I didn't think that Yuan Jin and Yuan Zhan would really be able to invite that monster. There's going to be a good show to watch. Quick, get someone to come and watch the show. That monster is about to attack. Many people couldn't help but shout. Even some of the older generation members couldn't help but get excited. The strength that Lu Ming had displayed was extremely powerful, but that monster was even more terrifying in their hearts. A fierce battle was certain to follow. Many people took out their voice transmission jade talismans and called for others to come and watch. Coupled with those who had rushed over after hearing the news, this region was now packed with people. In the sky and on the ground, there were people everywhere. Lu Ming followed everyone's gazes. He was also very curious as to what sort of person the people of the primal divine lake called a monster, and how strong he was. However, Lu Ming was stunned when he saw it. Lu Ming opened his mouth slightly and widened his eyes in disbelief. The myriad god. He naturally recognized the myriad god at a glance. Although the myriad god's temperament had changed significantly, his appearance and life essence aura had not changed at all. He could be recognized at a glance. Lu Ming had not expected to meet the myriad god here. Could it be that the world the myriad gods went to was the primordial divine lake world? That's right. The primordial divine lake has pure primordial divine spirits. The others are either descendants of the primordial divine spirits or existences who cultivate the primordial divine body. It is very similar to the primordial divine spirit world, but the environment is better and the level is higher. I should have thought of this earlier. What a coincidence. Back then, I wasn't able to go to that world, but now, I've come here using this method. In an instant, many thoughts appeared in Lu Ming's mind. This brat is scared. At this moment, Yuan Jin, Yuan Zhan, and Wan Shen had arrived. When Yuan Jin and Yuan Zhan saw the dumbfounded expression on Lu Ming's face, they thought that Lu Ming was afraid. They sneered inwardly and looked forward to seeing Lu Ming being suppressed by the myriad gods. Which one are you talking about? Myriad God asked. It's him. Yuan Jin hurriedly said to Lu Ming. Oh. Myriad God's gaze fell on Lu Ming, but it only circled around Lu Ming. When his gaze fell on Autumn Moon, he was stunned. Back in the Taishu dynasty, Myriad God had seen Autumn Moon before. Myriad God's face was immediately filled with joy. In a flash, he appeared in front of Autumn Moon. Lu Ming didn't stop him because the other party was Myriad God. Why should he stop him? Moreover, he realized that even if he wanted to stop him, he couldn't because Myriad God's cultivation was too high. He was certain that Myriad God had stepped into the God Emperor realm. He wasn't sure what God Emperor realm Myriad God was exactly, but he felt that Myriad God's body contained boundless and terrifying energy that was unfathomable. Miss Autumn Moon, you are Miss Autumn Moon. Why are you here? The Myriad God said with a look of joy. Myriad God, why are you here? Autumn Moon also recognized Myriad God and asked curiously. Haha, didn't Lu Ming tell you? Back then, I went to a place to cultivate. That place is here. By the way, where's Lu Ming? Didn't he come with you? Myriad God laughed. He didn't have the sharp temperament from before. His gaze swept around as if he was looking for Lu Ming. Isn't young master right in front of you? Autumn Moon smiled and then took Lu Ming's hand. You mean he's Lu Ming? Miss Autumn Moon, don't lie to me. His life origin aura is completely different. Miss Autumn Moon. Are you lying to me because you have fallen in love with someone else? Myriad God obviously didn't believe her. As he spoke, his face sank and he stared at Lu Ming with hostility. What nonsense are you talking about? That's young master Lu Ming. Autumn Moon's face turned red as she stomped her feet. Myriad God, I've changed my life origin aura because I've cultivated a special cultivation method. It's normal that you don't recognize me. However, I'm indeed Lu Ming. Don't you remember the first time we met? Lu Ming said with a smile. Then, he briefly recounted the first time he met Myriad God. Are you really Lu Ming? The Myriad Gods were still somewhat skeptical. If Lu Ming was alone, even if Lu Ming recounted the first time they met, Myriad God wouldn't believe him. He would think that Lu Ming's memory had been stolen. However, with Autumn Moon around, he had no choice but to believe it. Yes, that's Lu Ming. I can testify. Qiu jumped out and said. You're here too. Looks like you're really Lu Ming. I didn't expect you to change so much after not seeing you for so many years. I almost couldn't recognize you. Myriad God said. He looked at Lu Ming and smiled. You've changed a lot too. Your strength is even more unfathomable. Lu Ming laughed and hugged Myriad God. The others on the side were dumbfounded. What was going on? They originally thought that Myriad God would attack Lu Ming. They didn't expect Myriad God and Lu Ming to know each other, as if they were old friends. Yuan Jin and Yuan Zhan were especially dumbfounded. They had gone to great lengths to invite Myriad God here just to deal with Lu Ming. What was going on? It was completely different from what they had expected. Wan Shen, we're talking about him. You quickly suppress him. Yuan Jin couldn't help but shout. However, he regretted it after shouting. His face turned pale. Sure enough, Myriad God turned around and looked at him with a gloomy face. You two called me here just to deal with my brother? Are you itching for a bone? Then I'll help you fix it. Run! Before Myriad God could finish his words, Yuan Jin and Yuan Zhan's faces changed drastically. They retreated without thinking. You want to run in front of me? Myriad God shouted coldly. He stretched out a hand and grabbed at the air. Suddenly, an incomparably huge palm appeared in the sky and pressed down on Yuan Jin and Yuan Zhan. It was as if a giant had suddenly appeared in the sky. New. Yuan Zhan and Yuan Jin roared and resisted with all their strength. However, their strength couldn't withstand a single blow from this palm. With a boom, the two of them smashed into the ground like two meteors. Chapter 4207. Yuan Jin and Yuan Zhan were smashed to the ground by Wan Shun's palm. They lay on the ground, twitching and coughing up blood. It was a horrible sight. Their faces were pale, and their bones were almost all broken. The others on the side looked pale, but no one dared to say anything. Even Yuan Jin and Yuan Zhan's elders didn't dare to say anything. First, Wan Shun's strength was too strong. Second, Wan Shun's identity was too special. He had unparalleled talent, and all the important people of the primordial divine lake had high hopes for him. He was known as the seed of hope of the primordial divine spirit clan. No one could beat Wan Shun in terms of background. Who dared to touch him? Yuan Jin and Yuan Zhan's elders could only turn a blind eye. After dealing with Yuan Jin and Yuan Zhan, Wan Shun looked at Fei Yi and said coldly, "I heard that you attacked my brother. What? Are you bullying him because he's new here, or because you're a great supreme god?" Fei Ye's face turned pale, and he explained, "Wan Shun, I was just exchanging pointers with him." Exchanging pointers? Oh, I'll also exchange pointers with you. Come on. Wan Shun said as he stepped forward and walked toward Fei Yi. Fei Ye's face turned even uglier, and he shouted, "Don't go too far." "Yes, I'm going too far. What can you do about it?" Wan Shun sneered and continued walking toward Fei Yi. "Don't think that I'm afraid of you." Flying Leaf was enraged by the myriad gods pressuring. He roared and unleashed his aura. He once again transformed into a towering tree. This time, the tree he transformed into was more than 10 times taller than before. It blotted out the sky and the sun, and its aura covered the mountains and rivers. His aura was terrifying. That's the second layer of the great supreme god realm. Lu Ming's eyes flashed. Fei Yi released his aura, and his strength was shocking. He had the strength of the second layer of the great supreme god realm. He wasn't an ordinary cultivator of the second layer of the great supreme god realm, but a peerless genius. He could probably fight against an ordinary cultivator of the fourth layer of the great supreme god realm. If he attacked with his full strength, Lu Ming wouldn't be his match. Lu Ming couldn't help but worry for Wan Shun. However, Wan Shun's expression didn't change in front of such a vast aura. "Come," the myriad god said indifferently. "You forced me to do this." Fei Yi roared, and countless leaves flew out from the huge treetop. This time, the leaves did not scatter. Instead, they gathered together and transformed into a beam of green light that blasted towards the myriad gods. The strength of his aura was many times stronger than when he was dealing with Lu Ming. Seeing this move, Lu Ming knew that he would not be able to block it with his own strength, unless he used the mysterious ice rod. However, the myriad god remained calm. Boom. At this moment, Wan Shun moved. The muscles on one of his arms bulged, and there was divine power circulating on it. Then he punched out. Heaven and earth shook violently as a terrifying fist energy burst forth from Wan Shun's fist, and collided with Fei Ye's attack. Then, one could see that Fei Ye's attack was as weak as tofu. He was directly pierced through by Wan Shun's fist. The fist energy didn't stop there. It bombarded the trunk of the huge tree that Fei Yi had transformed into, and a huge hole was blasted open. A mournful scream was heard as the huge tree rapidly shrank. Fei Yi turned back into his human form, and there was a hole in his abdomen. Blood was flowing out. Fei Yi kept coughing up blood. His face was pale and his aura was weak. He had been severely injured. However, his eyes were still fixed on the myriad god. He shouted in disbelief. Your cultivation has broken through again? Don't worry. I only used the cultivation of the second layer of the Emperor God realm. Why would I need to use a higher cultivation to deal with you? The myriad god said indifferently. Fei Yi was so angry that he coughed up another mouthful of blood. The surrounding geniuses were also pale. They looked at Lu Ming in shock. The myriad god's divine power had become even stronger. It seemed to have surpassed theirs. So powerful. The myriad god's improvement is too fast. His future is limitless. His talent is too strong. Our primordial divine spirit clan has a chance to rise. Some of the older generation figures who were watching the battle sighed. However, their voices were filled with surprise. This guy is really monstrous. Even Lu Ming couldn't help but sigh. He knew the myriad god's background. The myriad god had evolved from the blood of many primordial divine spirits. He had great potential and talent. It was really terrifying. Now Lu Ming still couldn't see through the myriad god's cultivation. However, Lu Ming estimated that the myriad god's cultivation was above the third layer of the emperor god realm. Relying on his forbidden body, his cultivation speed was already monstrous. However, the myriad god seemed to be even more monstrous. It seemed like the primordial divine lake was really suitable for the myriad god's cultivation. The myriad god had made the right choice to come here. Who else wants to try? After dealing with Fei Yi, the myriad god didn't even look at Fei Yi. He looked at Song Zhan and the others. Song Zhan and the others turned pale. They looked unsightly. Haha, the myriad god, we're just here to watch the show. We have no intention of fighting. Right. I'm just here to watch the show. Only Fei Yi will fight. Right, I remember that I have something to do. I'll leave first. I also have something to do. Song Zhan and the other geniuses who were as famous as Fei Yi found excuses to leave. The myriad god, you're very impressive now. Lu Ming walked over and laughed. These people are just itching for a beating. If you give them an inch, they'll take a mile. They'll have no choice but to use some thunderous methods. The myriad god smiled. Right, where are you staying now? The myriad god asked again. On that mountain. Lu Ming pointed to the mountain peak in the distance that they had come down from earlier. Oh, then let's go up. I still have many questions to ask you, the myriad god said. Then Lu Ming and the others returned the way they had come. On the way, they chatted as they walked. Lu Ming briefly recounted his experiences over the years, and why his life origin aura had changed. Lu Ming was wary of the Heavenly Palace. In the Heavenly Palace, these things could never be spoken of. However, the primordial divine lake was at odds with the Heavenly Palace. In that case, there was no harm in speaking of it. It did not matter if others knew that he had a taboo body. I see. To think that there's such a mysterious cultivation method in this world that can sever the past and future. Even the life origin aura is different. The myriad god exclaimed. Right, myriad god, is this the world you came from? Lu Ming asked again. That's right. The myriad god nodded and explained. There's a passage in the primordial divine lake that connects to the primordial divine spirit world. These two worlds are actually very similar. They both gave birth to primordial divine spirits. They both gave birth to primordial divine spirits? Lu Ming was shocked. Chapter 4208. A place that gave birth to a primordial divine spirit was no small matter. Yes, but the primordial divine lake is of a higher level. In the primordial divine lake, 72 primordial divine spirits were born. Moreover, the territory here is larger and the cultivation environment is better. There are primordial divine spirits and other experts guarding it. The primordial divine spirit world that we went to was considered the peripheral world of the primordial divine lake. We were looking for geniuses who cultivated the primordial divine body. Wanxin continued to explain. Looking for geniuses who cultivated the primordial divine spirit body, and bringing them to this world? However, many of the races outside are controlled by the Heavenly Palace. Lu Ming said with a look of doubt. Because the Heavenly Palace ruled the universe. The races of the universe all obeyed the orders of the Heavenly Palace. But here, they were looking for geniuses who cultivated the primordial divine body. Wasn't this raising a tiger to invite calamity? So, at first, we only brought them to the peripheral worlds to let them cultivate. If there are outstanding geniuses who are suitable for training, we will consider bringing them to the primordial divine lake. However, before bringing them here, they have to go through many tests and tests. Only those who reject the Heavenly Palace and can be used by the primordial divine lake will be brought to the primordial divine lake for training. However, There are very few of them. There is no other way. The primordial divine lake has few geniuses, so we can only look for them from the outside. Those who are not suitable will be sent back. Wan Shen explained. Lu Ming suddenly thought of Murong Qiushui. Murong Qiushui should have made contact with the experts of the primordial divine lake. It was said that he was taken in as a disciple by an important person. However, they met later on in the primitive universe. Now that he thought about it, Murong Qiushui should have failed the test and been sent out. The primordial divine lake world has existed since the beginning of the universe. It has been passed down until now and has always been fighting with the heavenly palace. However, the heavenly palace is too strong and the primordial divine lake is no match for it. It can only float in the universe. Saying this, Wan Shen's eyes filled with hatred. Now I know that the primordial divine spirit body was destroyed by the heavenly palace. The blood of the primordial divine spirit flows in my body. As they spoke, they returned to the mountain. Although ordinary people couldn't come up to this mountain peak, however, Myriad God had a special status. He could go anywhere in the 4 cities of the primordial divine lake. Lu Ming, I heard that you are very strong. You easily defeated Fei Yi in a battle of the same level. My hands are itching. Why don't we have a spar? The Myriad God said. If I were to spar with you, wouldn't I be looking for trouble? I can't even see through your cultivation. Lu Ming shook his head. What a joke. Flying Leaf, who had unleashed his full combat strength, had been beaten half to death by Wan Shen's punch. He was not looking for trouble. Haha, of course, I won't use my cultivation level to oppress you. I'll suppress my cultivation level to the 9th godly emperor layer. The Myriad God Dao looked like he was itching for a fight. Oh, that's fine. Lu Ming nodded in agreement. He was also very curious about how strong Myriad God was. Back when he had just separated from Myriad God's ability to fight across levels wasn't particularly exaggerated. However, he knew very well that it was because the potential of the myriad deities had yet to be unlocked. So many years had passed. How much potential had the myriad deities developed? Wan Shen and Lu Ming found a spacious area and stood facing each other. The 3 people from Autumn Moon and Qiuqiu stood in the distance and watched. Lu Ming, be careful, said the Myriad God Dao as he released his aura. It was the aura of the 9th godly emperor layer. The Myriad God Dao had suppressed his cultivation level to the 9th godly emperor layer. Bang! The Myriad God Dao took a step forward and charged at Lu Ming like a bolt of lightning. As he charged, the Myriad God Dao's muscles twitched. His body was covered in a layer of divine power as he threw a punch at Lu Ming. Wherever the fist passed, the void rumbled and exploded. Its power was terrifying. Good! Shouted Lu Ming. He circulated his forbidden energy, and his body was covered in a layer of dazzling light. He threw a punch at the Myriad God Dao as well. This punch contained several ancient secret skills with astonishing offensive power. Boom! When the 2 fists collided, it was like 2 stars colliding, producing a powerful shockwave. Then Lu Ming and the Myriad God Dao's bodies trembled at the same time as they retreated. What powerful strength! Lu Ming felt his fists go slightly numb. Although he hadn't used his full strength just now, the power he erupted with was already very shocking. It was at least at the stage where he could fight across 7 levels. However, it couldn't do anything to the Myriad God Dao. The moment the 2 fists collided, he felt that the power of the Myriad God Dao's fist was astonishing. It was pure physical strength and divine power strength. The Myriad God Dao's physical body had boundless strength and was terrifyingly powerful. He was like a true primordial god. His divine power was rich and condensed, pure and ancient. It was equivalent to awakening the divine power quintessence multiple times. In short, it was boundless and indestructible. It was extremely terrifying. Powerful. Much more powerful than before. This divine power should be equivalent to awakening the divine power quintessence 8 times. Lu Ming praised inwardly. The myriad god Dao had evolved from a large number of primordial gods' flesh and blood. He cultivated all kinds of primordial divine power and awakened the divine power quintessence. His talent was too strong. His current divine power was comparable to that of someone who had awakened the divine power quintessence 8 times. Otherwise, How could he contend against the taboo power? Is this the taboo power? It's so powerful. Ha ha ha, Lu Ming. You didn't use your full strength, right? Neither did I. Let's go all out then. Don't hold back. The myriad god Dao laughed, his fighting spirit surging. As you wish. Lu Ming roared. All the cells in his body trembled. All kinds of secret techniques and ancient secret techniques in his cells erupted and merged together. Shwa. Lu Ming's palm was like a blade as he chopped down. A huge blade light slashed at the myriad god Dao. This move was a combination of even more ancient secret techniques. For example, the Great God Saber Art, Great Shatter Art, Great Destruction Art, Great Aurora Art. This move contained many kinds of terrifying offensive power. Its power was even more terrifying than before. Gate of Domination. The myriad god Dao roared. Above his head, a huge stone door appeared. It was ancient and powerful. This was the origin secret technique, Gate of Domination. Lu Ming had controlled it before. Now it was in his past body. Roar. The huge Gate of Domination rushed toward Lu Ming, letting out a terrifying roar. Shockingly, an enormous monster emerged from the Sovereign Lord's gate. This monster was incomparably huge and looked very ferocious. There were several huge horns on its head. This is a primordial god? No, it's a primordial god's soul. Lu Ming's heart skipped a beat. He did not expect that the Gate of Domination could be cultivated to such a high level that it could summon the corresponding primordial god's soul. Chapter 4209. The soul of the primordial god that appeared in the Gate of Domination opened its bloody mouth and bit down on the saber gleam that Lu Ming had slashed out. However, it only lasted for a few breaths of time before the primordial god's soul couldn't withstand the saber light's attack. It opened its mouth and was cleaved in half, its body rapidly retreating. Clang. The saber light followed, slashing at the god's gate. The god's gate shook violently and flew back to Wan Shun. However, the saber gleam that Lu Ming slashed out was blocked. Amazing! Again 10,000 Law's spear, colored glass fire. Wan Shun growled. His divine power grew even stronger, pushing it to the peak of the 9th godly emperor realm. All sorts of secret techniques appeared above his head. Soon, more than 20 secret techniques appeared above Wan Shun's head. All of them were origin secret techniques. More than 20 origin secret techniques all exuded a terrifying aura. Every origin secret technique severed at least 6 shackles. Some of them even severed 7 shackles. Lu Ming's pupil shrank. It was too shocking. At myriad god's age and cultivation level, even if he could sever 6 or 7 shackles of a single origin technique, he would be 1 in 10,000. He would be a peerless monster. All God, on the other hand, had over 20 quintessence secret arts that had reached this level. Lu Ming, if you can't handle it, you have to speak, Wan Shun said. Don't worry. Go all out. Lu Ming's eyes shone brightly, revealing a powerful battle intent. It was rare for him to show such an expression in a battle of the same level. This was because he felt pressured. He'd already reached the limit of the godly emperor realm. He could fight across 9 levels. He'd originally thought that no one would be able to pressure him in a battle of the same level. He hadn't expected Wan Shun to be able to do so. Boom. Lu Ming activated the battle character art, increasing his battle prowess to the peak by 6 times. Wan Shun's eyes lit up. Alright, so you still have something up your sleeve. Then I won't hold back. With that, myriad god charged towards Lu Ming. Over 20 origin source secret techniques also shot towards Lu Ming. Every origin source secret technique emitted terrifying ripples. Some were fast, some were very hot, and some were as heavy as a mountain. Each origin source secret technique had its own characteristics, but they all had one thing in common, which was that their attack power was extremely shocking. Good timing. Lu Ming's fighting spirit surged as he pushed his forbidden power to the limit. With a wave of his hand, various secret techniques appeared around him. They were all ancient secret techniques, and there were even more of them than the myriad gods. The secret techniques of both sides clashed in the air. Boom, boom, boom. Amidst the dazzling light, the two of them fought fiercely. Every second, there would be hundreds of collisions. This area was completely enveloped by all kinds of divine light. Ordinary people couldn't see the situation inside at all. They could only hear a series of violent rumbles. The terrifying energy swept out in all directions, and some of it continuously bombarded the ground. However, this mountain was the place where the divine lords and primordial divine spirits cultivated in seclusion. It was extremely tough, and their attacks couldn't even leave a mark on it. This was also the reason why they chose to fight here. In the distance, Qiumun and the others circulated their divine power to their eyes. With their God-Emperor cultivation, they could see the battle clearly. So terrifying. What kind of monsters are they? Is this still the power of a God-Emperor? They're really sick. How many levels can they cross to fight? Anyway, I'm definitely no match for them. The beautiful faces of Qiuyu's two senior sisters were filled with shock. It was already a miracle for such a person to appear, but now they saw two of them. It was really a miracle of miracles. The battle between the two of them became more and more intense. In the beginning, the two of them still held back. After all, they were friends and were only sparring, so they were afraid of hurting each other. However, after exchanging blows, they realized that each other's strength was above their expectations. Therefore, they became more at ease and slowly raised their fighting strength to the peak. Soon, the two of them had exchanged hundreds of blows, but there was still no clear winner. Awesome, awesome! Lu Ming's fighting spirit grew stronger and stronger. He casually used all kinds of ancient secret techniques. However, Wan Shun's strength was also very terrifying. He had used more than 20 offensive origin source secret techniques at the beginning. Later, he used other origin source secret techniques, such as defensive ones, speed ones, and so on. When combined, his fighting strength was about the same as Lu Ming's. The two of them couldn't do anything to each other. Later on, Lu Ming even triggered the battle formula to increase his fighting strength by 7 times. However, he discovered that it was the same as last time. After activating the battle character incantation, the strength of his taboo power actually decreased. This caused his battle strength to remain at the level where he could fight across 9 levels, unable to surpass it. Lu Ming knew that this was the limit, and it was difficult to surpass it. Soon, the two of them had exchanged hundreds of blows. Boom. Finally, with a heaven-shaking explosion, the two of them retreated at the same time and stood facing each other. Amazing, amazing! Lu Ming, you are many times more powerful than before. Wan Shun sighed as he gradually withdrew his aura. The battle had reached this point, and there was no need to continue. Lu Ming also withdrew his aura, and the fluctuations coming from his body weakened. Wan Shun, you're the amazing one. I originally thought that I could suppress you after obtaining the forbidden power, but it seems like I was overthinking things. Lu Ming said. He couldn't help but sigh. Wan Shun was just too powerful. After fusing many ancient secret techniques and ancient secret techniques, his forbidden power had received a massive boost in quality. It was invincible and terrifying. However, Wan Shun's divine body was too strong, and his origin source divine power had been awakened too many times. Coupled with the origin source secret techniques that had severed many shackles, he was completely capable of contending against Wan Shun. In truth, I lost. Your battle strength has already reached the limit of the deity emperor realm. You can fight across 9 levels. Even though I can fight against cultivators who are 9 cultivation levels higher than me. That's because I'm suppressing my cultivation level. My original cultivation level is the Great Supreme God layer. After breaking through to the Great Supreme God layer, my original strength and my original secret techniques have advanced by leaps and bounds. Even though I'm suppressing my cultivation level to the 9th Godly Emperor layer, my original strength and my original strength haven't changed. When I was in the Deity Emperor realm, I could only fight across 8 levels. That's why I lost. Wan Shun said. Don't be modest. Come, let's drink. Lu Ming smiled and walked over to pat Wan Shun's shoulder. After a while, the rich aroma of meat wafted out of Lu Ming's residence. Lu Ming had a large pile of storage rings on him, and there were all sorts of things in them. Fine wine, ingredients, spices, and other things were naturally not lacking. Although he didn't need to eat now and wasn't hungry, he would still occasionally eat to satisfy his cravings. Chapter 42:10. The group chatted as they ate. Lu Ming, you said that your past self, mainly cultivates various kinds of divine powers. Why don't you come here to cultivate? Here, you can cultivate various kinds of divine powers and Origin's secret skills. The effects are very good. Myriad God said. I had such a plan. Lu Ming nodded. Then come. Let me tell you, there are great opportunities in the primordial divine lake. The reason I cultivated so quickly is because of the opportunities one found in the primordial divine lake. When your past self comes, we can go together. Myriad God said. That lake in the primordial divine lake. Lu Ming looked toward the west. That's right. That lake is called the primordial divine lake. That's how this world got its name. In ancient times, 72 primordial divine spirits were born from that lake. The primordial divine spirit said. Myriad God explained. All of them were born from that lake. This time, Lu Ming, Qiuyu and the others were shocked. They had heard that 72 primordial divine spirits were born in the primordial divine lake world. They had thought that these 72 primordial divine spirits were spread out, and different regions gave birth to different primordial divine spirits. For example, the primordial divine spirit world that Lu Ming had been to had 13 famous mountains, and each mountain had given birth to a primordial divine spirit. But it was different here. The 72 primordial divine spirits were all born from that lake. This was a little shocking. Yes. Moreover, these 72 primordial divine spirits were born from eggs. After they left, the eggshells were left behind. These eggshells are peerless treasures for those who cultivate divine power. They are extremely beneficial for cultivating divine power, awakening divine power, and comprehending Origin's secret arts. In the primordial divine lake world, even a fingernail-sized eggshell is priceless. It's very useful even for high-level god emperors. Moreover, there are primordial divine clouds and diluted divine herbs in the primordial divine lake. They are all very valuable. Myriad God said. The primordial divine lake shouldn't be easy to enter, right? Lu Ming said. Naturally, he would not be blindly overjoyed. Since there were so many precious treasures in the primordial divine lake, if they could be obtained easily, then how could they have stayed until now? You're right. The waves of the primordial divine lake are monstrous. Moreover, the water of the primordial divine lake is not ordinary water. Every drop of water is extremely heavy and accompanied by huge waves. Its power is extremely shocking. In addition, there is also an incomparably powerful pressure. It is very difficult for ordinary people to barge in. Only those with great talent can enter easily. That place has become a training ground for the young geniuses of the primordial divine lake. It's also a treasure hunting ground. Tell your past self to come here. Once you get some primordial divine spirit eggshells, your cultivation base will definitely improve by leaps and bounds. Myriad Gods Tao. Lu Ming's eyes lit up. All right, I'll open the wormhole and let my past self come over. Lu Ming nodded. Immediately, he took out 36 formation discs and injected his forbidden energy into them. Suddenly, the 36 discs floated in the air, emitting a bright light. A vortex appeared in the middle, spinning continuously. Everyone waited quietly. After a period of time, a wormhole was successfully opened. Qiumoon and the others stared at the wormhole with bright eyes. Not long after, a figure suddenly appeared in the wormhole. The figure was slender, and his long hair fluttered in the wind. He slowly became clearer. Young master. Qiumoon could not help but exclaim in surprise. That's right. The figure was Lu Ming's past self. His appearance and aura were exactly the same as Lu Ming's past self. Although Lu Ming's current self was still Lu Ming, his appearance and aura were different after all. Qiuyu felt a little strange in her heart. At this moment, when she saw his past self, she felt closer to him and immediately flew over. Qiumoon. Lu Ming's past self smiled and nodded. His figure then left the wormhole and appeared on the ground. Lu Ming's current self waved his hand and put away the 36 formation discs. Lu Ming, this is your past self? TSK, TSK, TSK. You two are the same person. How strange, how strange. The 10,000 gods glanced back and forth between the past self and the present self. They clicked their tongues in amazement. Qiumoon also glanced back and forth between the two Lu Mings. She was extremely curious. Don't worry. Even though we're two people, we're still one. We're both Lu Ming, said Lu Ming's current self. Lu Ming, your past self is not good enough. He only has the strength of the 7th godly emperor layer. You have to catch up, said the 10,000 gods, staring at his past self. His past self's cultivation level was indeed the 7th godly emperor layer. After all, his past self had cultivated the 10,000 cosmos Tao formula. He had many different kinds of godly strength. Now he could control 21 kinds of godly strength and secret skills. Now that he had broken through to the 7th godly emperor layer, it was already an amazing speed. It had something to do with his talent and the cultivation conditions of the Dragon Clan's mother planet. Of course, it also had to do with Ao Qian and Fei Huang's guidance. 10,000 gods, let's go to the primordial godly lake. I came here for the primordial godly lake. Lu Ming went over and said, let's go, said the 10,000 gods. He turned around and led the way. Lu Ming's past self and present self, as well as Qiu Moon and the others, followed closely behind him. Very quickly, they left the huge city and flew west. Boom boom boom. After flying for a while, they heard a deafening rumble. It was the sound of waves crashing. After a while, they could see the lake more clearly. The vast and boundless lake was like a vast ocean, vast and boundless. Lu Ming stood in the sky and channeled the taboo power into his eyes. He could barely see the other side of the lake. There was a huge city there. That was the city on the western shore of the primordial godly lake. In the lake, huge waves rose to a height of over 10,000 meters. When they fell, they created a deafening explosion. It was terrifying. There were also huge whirlpools in some parts of the lake. The whirlpools spun crazily. The center was pitch black, as if it could crush everything. The closer we get to the center of the primordial godly lake, the more powerful the waves are. It's also more dangerous. Correspondingly, we can obtain more opportunities. There are almost no opportunities in the outer area. Let's enter the primordial godly lake from the center, said the 10,000 gods. All right. Lu Ming and the others nodded. They continued flying into the primordial godly lake. Whoosh whoosh whoosh. Above the primordial divine lake, there was a terrifying howling wind. It was like a sharp blade. Lu Ming and the rest could only set up defenses on their bodies to block it. Very quickly, they had flown 30,000 li. Let's go down from here and slowly move forward. We should be able to withstand it. I'm afraid something unexpected will happen if we go further, said the 10,000 gods. Chapter 42:11. Lu Ming and company naturally had no objections to the myriad god's suggestion. After all, the myriad god had been cultivating here for many years, and was most familiar with the environment. The closer to the center of the primordial divine lake, the stronger it was. The eggshell of the primordial divine spirit was at the bottom of the lake. The other divine herbs and treasures were also at the bottom of the lake. To obtain these treasures, they had to search from the bottom of the lake and sink to the bottom of the lake. If they were to fly too far and sink to the bottom of the lake, the danger of the environment below might exceed what they could withstand. If they were not careful, they might die. They would first sink to a safe area before slowly pushing forward. This way, the power would gradually increase. If they could not withstand it, they would not be caught off guard and could slowly retreat. This was the safest method. Immediately, they set up layers of defense around themselves before diving into the lake. Many shields appeared around Lu Ming's past self. This was the origin secret skill, Tianxian Shield. The current profound sky shield was many times stronger than before. It enveloped his body tightly. As for his present body, he used his great defensive technique to cover his body with a layer of light. Boom. The moment Lu Ming entered the lake, he felt like dozens of mountains had crashed into him. Even his great defensive technique trembled. What a powerful force. This lake water is no ordinary lake water. It contains an ancient aura, as though it was condensed from divine power. Lu Ming sensed it carefully, and found that the surrounding lake water was extremely viscous and heavy. When a wave came, it was as though dozens of divine mountains had crashed into it. The force was astonishing. This lake water seemed to be condensed from ancient divine power, like the divine power of a primordial divine spirit. Of course, it was impossible for this to be the divine power of a primordial divine spirit. It only resembled it a little. If it was real, they would not be able to withstand it. Fortunately, the strength of the lake water was something they could withstand. Because the 72 primordial divine spirits were born here, the lake water here is filled with the chi of the primordial divine spirits, becoming violent and terrifying. It's a pity that we can't absorb it. However, there are some treasures that we can find in such an environment. The myriad god explained. Everyone kept sinking. The primordial divine lake was very deep, and they sank for a few thousand miles before reaching the bottom of the lake. Although there weren't any huge waves at the bottom of the lake, there was an undercurrent surging with terrifying power. However, this was still within the acceptable range of everyone. This place has already been explored by others. We don't need to waste time. Let's move forward. Myriad gods Tao. Everyone stepped forward, breaking through the waves. In next to no time, they traveled another 20,000 kilometers. The further they went, the greater the pressure of the waves became. In addition, there was also a terrifying pressure at the bottom of the lake. This kind of pressure was ancient, like the pressure of a primordial god. This kind of pressure could not only affect the body, but also the mind and soul. They seemed to hear a terrifying roar coming from ancient times. Those with weak willpower would find it difficult to continue moving forward. At this point, the two senior sisters of Autumn Moon were already struggling. Lu Ming, on the other hand, felt fine. Although Lu Ming's cultivation was the lowest among all of them, he was still very strong. However, he had a forbidden body. His soul was scattered in all his cells, and he could control all kinds of ancient secret techniques, so it was easy for him to resist. As for his past self, his cultivation was only at the 7th Divine Emperor realm, but his body was emitting all kinds of light, and all kinds of origin secret techniques, to resist the pressure around him. In addition, Lu Ming's willpower was strong enough. The pressure of the primordial gods was not too strong for Lu Ming. Senior sisters, are you all right? Qiu Yu looked at her two senior sisters worriedly. We're fine. Let's keep moving. Autumn Moon's two senior sisters said. They were all geniuses and had their pride. Seeing that Lu Ming's cultivation was lower than theirs, they naturally did not want to give up. They continued moving forward and soon, they had traveled another 10,000 kilometers. The pressure was even stronger. Qiu Yu's two senior sisters were already panting. However, when they arrived here, they finally found something. That's a divine power source orb. Lu Ming's eyes lit up. He saw a few crystal-like things not far away. They were divine power source orbs, treasures that could help people activate origin secret techniques. Such treasures were very useful when one was at the lower level of the immortal state. Many powerful clans usually bought them to cultivate their juniors. The price of such consumables had always been high, and they were very popular. One of Autumn Moon's senior sisters was the closest to them. She stepped forward and put away the divine power source orbs. Then she continued moving forward. Soon she found something else. Not far away, a divine medicine was swaying at the bottom of the lake. Needless to say, a divine medicine that could grow in such an environment was extraordinary. Lu Ming's past self was closer. He stepped forward and picked the divine medicine, then returned and gave it to his current self. The past and the present were one, so there was no need to talk about them. The treasures that were useful to his past self were kept by his past self. The treasures that were useful to his current self were kept by his current self. This divine medicine contained powerful life energy, and was most suitable for the cultivation of a forbidden body. It was most suitable to keep it with his current self. Next, they continued to make discoveries. Divine power source orbs, divine medicine, divine origin flowers, and other things would be found from time to time. Those who were closer to them would pick them up. However, when they traveled about 10,000 miles, the two senior sisters of Autumn Moon's Autumn Moon had almost reached their limit and could no longer move forward. If they continued, they would exceed their limits and be injured. Not only would their bodies be injured, but their souls would also be injured. Physical injuries were easy to recover, but soul injuries were more troublesome. We won't continue. We'll stop here and explore the surrounding area. You can continue. The two senior sisters of Autumn Moon said. Senior sisters, be careful. Autumn Moon said with concern. Junior sisters of Autumn Moon, don't worry. We will be careful. I wish you all the best. One of the senior sisters said with a smile. After that, the two senior sisters of Autumn Moon stayed behind and explored horizontally, not approaching the center of the primordial divine lake. Lu Ming and the others continued to move forward. If they wanted to find a treasure like the primordial divine spirit eggshell, they had to go to the center of the primordial divine lake. Without the two senior sisters of Autumn Moon, their speed suddenly increased. Soon, they traveled another 20,000 miles. This place was already 90,000 miles away from the shore of the lake. The pressure here was even stronger. Lu Ming's past self felt the strong pressure, and the heavenly mystic shield was constantly vibrating. After all, the cultivation of his past self was still a little low, so he was facing a lot of pressure. Chapter 42:12. After all, his past self only had the strength of the seventh godly emperor layer. It was already a miracle that he had made it this far. His past self could withstand the pressure of the soul, but the pressure of the cultivation level was a bit difficult for him. At that moment, his present self walked over and used his great defensive technique to protect his past self. That made the pressure on his past self lessen. On the way, they found many things, but unfortunately, they didn't find the original godly spirit's eggshell. When they were 120,000 li away from the shore, suddenly, Autumn Moon's eyes widened, and she looked in a certain direction. There was something on the ground that was emitting a milky white light. Pure and terrifying energy was emanating from it. That thing was only the size of a fingernail, but it was like a sun, constantly emitting energy. The original godly spirit's eggshell. It's the original godly spirit's eggshell. Haha, we're lucky. The 10,000 gods smiled and said, Miss Autumn Moon, it's yours. Take it. Young master, do you want it? Autumn Moon looked at Lu Ming's past self. She knew that Lu Ming's past self had cultivated all kinds of godly strength. The original godly spirit's eggshell was very helpful to him. No need. You found it, so take it. There must be more at the bottom of the lake. The past self smiled. Autumn Moon didn't insist. She nodded and walked towards the original godly spirit's eggshell. When she arrived next to the original godly spirit's eggshell, Autumn Moon's heart suddenly emitted a powerful 9-colored light. They could vaguely see a 9-orifice heart. The sacred heart of 9 orifice. Autumn Moon's sacred heart of 9 orifice appeared and a 9-colored light enveloped the original godly spirit's eggshell. Then the original godly spirit's eggshell was absorbed by the sacred heart of 9 orifice. A powerful aura emanated from Qiuyu's body, but it was retracted in the next moment. She couldn't refine the original godly spirit's eggshell so easily. She had to refine it slowly. After discovering the original godly spirit's eggshell, they were excited and continued moving forward. After a short time, they found another one the size of a fingernail, but this time, there were other people nearby. A prodigy from the primordial divine lake also discovered the primordial divine spirit eggshell. However, under the pressure of the myriad gods, the other party could only retreat. This piece of primordial god eggshell was put away by Lu Ming's past self. But from then on, their good luck seemed to have run out. After searching for half a day, they didn't find a single piece of primitive god spirit eggshell. They didn't even find one the size of a fingernail. At this time, they were already about 200,000 miles away from the lakeside. At this point, the pressure was already terrifying. Rumble. At the bottom of the lake, the undercurrent was surging violently. Moreover, it contained a terrifying pressure that continuously battered their bodies. In front of them, there seemed to be a terrifying power that was like a barrier. They advanced a few times, but they were pushed back by that power. This is the limit. Every time I come here, I'll be forced out. Myriad gods Tao. You didn't even go there once? Lu Ming's present body asked. No. I'm guessing that there's definitely a great opportunity inside. Unfortunately, I can't enter. The power is too strong. The myriad gods shook their heads. I don't know if my taboo power can break it. I'll give it a try. Wait for me. Lu Ming's present body stepped forward. Young master, be careful. Qiu Yu said worriedly. Don't worry, I'll be fine. I'll do my best. Lu Ming smiled. He then took a step forward and dashed forward. Boom. A powerful force rushed toward Lu Ming. Break for me, Lu Ming shouted. The taboo power completely erupted and gathered on his palm. Lu Ming slashed out with his palm with all his strength. Boom. Lu Ming's palm collided with the force in front of him, and a violent explosion erupted. A large amount of lake water in the surroundings was repelled to the sides. Lu Ming's body trembled, and his arm kept shaking. However, Lu Ming's eyes lit up. He felt that the force in front of him wasn't unbreakable. Under the attack of the taboo power, there seemed to be a flaw, and a gap was torn open. All right, let's continue, Lu Ming shouted, and pushed the taboo power to the extreme. His palm struck out continuously. Boom, boom, boom. Intense rumbling sounds continued to ring out, and the entire area trembled. The lake water was being expelled, forming a vacuum. Although Lu Ming's body kept shaking, the force in front of him was indeed slowly being torn apart. Bam, bam. With every tear, Lu Ming took a step forward, and the ground under his feet shook violently. However, with every step, Lu Ming took another step forward. In this way, Lu Ming took more than 10 steps in a short period of time, advancing more than 10 meters. However, what made Lu Ming's heart sink was that the further he advanced, the stronger the force became. The pressure on Lu Ming was also increasing. After a few more steps, Lu Ming's body kept shaking. He was under great pressure. He used all his strength to attack, but it was difficult to continue tearing apart that force. Almost there, thought Lu Ming. He had the feeling that he was about to tear apart that force. As long as he could tear it apart, he would be able to enter the next area. However, the pressure was too great. Lu Ming couldn't break through it no matter what he did. Bingxian Rod, Lu Ming shouted in his heart. He took out the Bingxian Rod and attacked with all his might. However, it was useless. It wasn't a problem of attacking power. In terms of attacking power, the 10,000 gods were much stronger than him. In addition, there were many divine arch-gods in the primordial sacred lake, those above the 4th level of the divine god realm, and even those at the 7th, 8th, and 9th level of the divine god realm were stronger than Lu Ming. However, none of them could break through. Lu Ming was able to achieve this because of the special nature of the forbidden force. Therefore, using the Bingxian Rod and attacking with his hand had the same effect. It was the effect of the forbidden force. I can't break it. Unfortunately, my cultivation is still too low. The forbidden force isn't strong enough. If I could break through to the divine emperor realm, I would be able to break through this force and enter. Thought Lu Ming. Let's try again. Lu Ming gritted his teeth. He squeezed out the last bit of energy in his body and attacked with all his might. Bang. Finally, Lu Ming took another step forward. He took another step forward. He was even closer to breaking through, but he still didn't break through. He was still a bit away. Lu Ming felt that he was about to break through. Suddenly Lu Ming's eyes widened. At this point, he could vaguely see the scene behind the force. Previously, their vision had been completely blocked. They couldn't see what was in front of them. But now Lu Ming could vaguely see something. He was shocked. You're tuning in to the Li Mei's Wuxia Whispers YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.